Welcome to the studio. You're listening to Willow Waves, a student-produced podcast where kindergarten through 6th graders explore interests, promote solutions to global concerns, and communicate about everything related to our social and emotional learning.
We aim to amplify voices, share knowledge, and encourage conversations. Visit us at willowspringses.fcps.edu to learn more and subscribe.
Join us as we explore our diverse and dynamic world of elementary education.
Thank you for listening. I'm Nathan Harvey.
And I'm Evan Hoy.
We are your 5th grade hosts.
On today's episode of Willow Waves podcast, let's dig deep into geothermal energy.
Harnessing energy from the earth is not anything new. In ancient Greece, they created a mythological god, Hephaestus. He was the blacksmith and craftsman of the gods and lived in a forge inside a volcano. He was the son of Zeus, but was disabled, so his mother threw him into the sea.
He was rescued by 2 goddesses. Then they taught him how to create jewelry out of coral. After learning that, Zeus allowed him to come back to Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus, he created weapons and armor out of fire and metals. He even created lightning for his father. Volcanoes were one way people could access heat from inside the earth. With that heat, people created a type of renewable energy, geothermal.
Like the ancient Greeks, humans have been fascinated with understanding and harnessing the power inside the earth. One place where people get geothermal energy is from volcanoes in Iceland. There are lots of volcanoes in the area, and those volcanoes heat up the ground in Iceland. Then, people dig down to just the right temperature so they can harness geothermal energy.
In order to learn more about geothermal energy, we decided to interview a geothermal scientist named Mr. Casey.
He helped us learn and understand more about what geothermal energy is exactly and how it is used.
Here's a little bit more about Mr. Casey before we begin.
Casey Brokaw has degrees in Geology and Geophysics as well as 10 years of earth science experience.
He worked in a Geothermal Research Lab, as mentioned later in the podcast,
at Southern Methodist University.
With that, he gained knowledge of geothermal energy and how it can be used to help the usage of renewable energy.
All right, are you ready, Mr. Casey?
Sure, I'm ready to go.
All right, so let's get started. In your own words, what is geothermal energy?
So geothermal energy, geo being of the earth, and thermal just being thermal. So we're generating energy by extracting heat from the earth.
How long have you been studying it?
So, I as an undergrad researcher, like working at my bachelor's degree at SMU, we had a geothermal lab. So I worked in that part-time throughout the school year. And then for grad school, I concentrated in geophysics. So we looked at how heat was moving through the crust of the United States out in Colorado. I've been studying geothermal processes probably for a good 6 years.
I've been to Iceland, which uses a lot of geothermal energy.
So in Iceland, it's like easy, right? Because they have volcanoes, right?
Yeah.
It's right on the Mid-Atlantic rift, so the lava is coming up pretty much to the surface. We see volcanoes erupting there all the time. The magma is generally right below the surface, so you don't have to go very far down to get really hot temperatures you need to generate energy. The less you have to go down to get hotter, the easier it is to generate that kind of energy, that temperatures you need to, fire up a power plant.
So geothermal energy is underground, but then how do people collect it and then bring it back up?
You have plants called enhanced geothermal systems. You drill down to about the temperature you need. Every kilometer you drill down, you're gaining about 10 degrees C, so 10 degrees Celsius in temperature. And to generate geothermal energy, generally you need 60 to 80 degrees C. So you need to drill down about 6 to 8 kilometers. But I'm using kilometers instead of miles, but that's a pretty good distance, right? So
yeah. That sounds...
You're looking at about 4 miles down, about 4.5 miles down to get the temperatures you need. You don't need to get boiling. You don't need to get 100 degrees C, because what it does is they drill down, they go into granite, hard rock, and they frack it up, generally by using high pressure liquids to create space within the granite. Granite, as we've seen countertops, right, there's no pore spaces. So you need to break that rock up. So they break it up by using high pressure. Once they do that, they can start injecting a cold fluid, such as water down there. The water heats up, and they extract that hot water back up. And that hot water goes and exchanges heat through a heat exchanger to another working fluid that has a lower boiling point than water, right around that 60 to 80 degrees C.
And once the people get the geothermal energy, how do they transport it to people's homes? Do they put it in a truck or something, or is it already energy?
So it's just like any other kind of power plant. So that working fluid gets hot enough to where it turns to a vapor, right? Vapor rises. We know that something that's hotter generally rises. So it spins a turbine, and that turbine, like any other power plant, it has magnets, electrical magnets on it. So it generates a current. So that current is then transferred through transformers, through power lines all the way to our homes. Just like any other kind of power plant, like a nuclear power plant or any kind of power, like a hydroelectric power plant turbine spin. And so the turbines generate the electricity. And so the problem is, in the United States, I guess, that a lot of the hot provinces, we don't have a whole lot like in Iceland where it's sitting right on top of volcanoes, but there are some areas in the United States such as Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and California where there are, tectonic processes where the ground gets hotter at a shallower depth, so we don't have to go very far to generate the temperatures needed. But the problem with the American West is, unlike Virginia and the Northeast corridor, it's not very populated in certain areas where it's hot, so we need to transport that energy far distances, right? So you need longer power lines, you need more transformers to push that energy to get to the homes. Unlike Iceland or Japan, where you're sitting really close to geothermal energy at the source, here we have to make it go a further distance, which costs a lot of money. It was just in our backyards, like you have in Iceland.
Okay, do people sometimes get geothermal energy in the Yellowstone area? Because I know there's a lot of geysers there.
Perfect, yeah. Yellowstone would be a perfect place to do it. I don't think they have one in the works, but there are a couple testing that's where a couple companies I know that have tested out little geothermal systems where they'll use that hot water produced from those geysers, those hot springs, to produce geothermal energy. The problem is Yellowstone, it's a national park, you can't really develop on it.
Yeah.
The population around that area is pretty sparse, but what people will do around that area to take advantage of that geothermal energy, they have something called ground source heat pumps, where they'll use the geothermal energy to cool and warm their houses, because if we go down below the soil, it maintains a pretty constant temperature, and they can use that energy in their homes. So they can kind of have small scale, I guess, use energy generators on their homes using the geothermal energy.
All right, makes sense. And what are some pros and cons of geothermal energy?
So the pros of geothermal energy is it's renewable, right? All we need for it is just water.
Yeah.
Being pumped down, heating up, and coming back to the surface, and we can use that to drive that power plant, right? The heat exchanger, working fluid. So it's renewable in that sense. There's, we have plenty of water that we can use. You don't need the cleanest water, you don't need the freshest water. You just need water to pump down there, get warmed up, and brought back to the surface. So from that pro, it takes us, if we can start generating more electricity through geothermal, it starts cutting down on the energy we need from coal and fossil fuels such as natural gas, so it can help us minimize our uses of fossil fuels. The con would be that generally the hot regions of the United States, where you don't have to drill down that far to get hot temperatures, because if we look at a geothermal map of the United States, there's certain regions, especially in Colorado, the Basin Range province, Utah, it gets hot. You only need to go about 4 kilometers to 3 kilometers down, as opposed to 6 to 10 as you would in normal Russell regions like we have here in the American East. The western United States is generally underpopulated. So I guess the con would be we can get it, but the hot regions we need are too far away from population centers. So we would have to build out transmission lines, the power lines to transport that energy long distances. And then I'd say another con too is sometimes with enhanced geothermal systems, you might have read about this, if you're going down and you're pushing water at high pressure, it's generally that's what fracking is. And sometimes they can induce small earthquakes, which we saw in South Korea, I think, in the last 5 years. It did damage some homes in the area, but no one died. It's generally like low magnitude 3 to 5 earthquakes. So that is a possibility that you go down and you put fluid on one of those ancient fault lines, and then you can lubricate it. Will make it induce an earthquake, induce seismicity.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were geothermal maps of the U.S.
Yeah, so
cool.
if you go to the lab I used to work at, SMU, so that stands for Southern Methodist University. It's down in Dallas, Texas. We had a geothermal lab. So if you just type in like SMU geothermal on Google, like you can quickly find the map, which we're responsible for making for the Department of Energy. Data maps is like the second link you can click on, and you can see how they'll give you the geothermal gradients for the United States. And if you see on the eastern coast where we are, it's not as hot as you would say on the western side of the United States. That's because the crust on the western side of the United States is generally thinner. The Basin and Range province, because the crust had gotten pulled apart a little bit. On the east coast of the United States, it's originally thicker crust just due to the Appalachian Mountains, and it's older crust over here where we're sitting on. So it's thicker and colder. And the western United States is thinner, and you also have some volcanoes too, right? Like we know Mount St. Helens in Washington and stuff like that. We do have active magma chambers there, which you can use that to try to extract some energy from.
All right, now I'm gonna turn it over to my friend Evan here, so he's gonna be asking some questions now.
Where do you focus most of your work on geothermal? Like in the U.S. or like in the Ring of Fire?
That's a good question. So, currently my work, I work for the NGA, so National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So my work generally involves, I don't do much with geothermal anymore, but I still do thermal modeling and processes, and what we can tell, by the temperatures, surface temperatures, stuff like that of both water and the land, and what kind of intelligence we can derive from that. Now energy, the Department of Energy is always going to be funding renewable energy kind of research and how we can start minimizing our carbon footprint and using renewable energy. So I guess there is big interest in geothermal, but the problem is, how can we get the energy from the American West to more populated areas? That's where the research is going into. Do we need to, go down as far, well, I'm saying it's tough, it's expensive, right? And as the research is, how can we minimize the cost of geothermal energy to make it more usable for population centers in the United States? A lot of the funding's going.
It'd be nice if there was an easy way you could transport it over large distances.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is with transmission lines, as they get hot and they start to lose their energy, the further they go, they start to lose kind of the current, So that's part of it. And part of it is, can we get a working fluid that doesn't need to be as hot as, say, 80 degrees C? Can we get a working fluid down to 60 degrees C? So we wouldn't have to drill down as far, because the further you drill, the more sensitive it gets.
Yeah.
Maybe we can start to use, some of the old oil and gas wells. There's in research in that. Can we use the old oil and gas wells that already have pipes going down them, right? And can we start pumping fluids down there? Is it hot enough down at the bottom of the oil and gas well? It might be only 4 kilometers deep to start producing that kind of temperatures needed to derive geothermal energy from. So there's research in that, and I helped out with some projects on that. And it's a lot of engineering, it's a lot of money, but there is some promise, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah. So, does geothermal affect the surrounding community in any way?
Most of the time, no. There are a few, anecdotal, or I would say there are a few times where it has, just because, like I said, you are pumping fluid down at depth, and there are, not all fault zones are active. There are some, ancient faults buried below our feet here, even in Virginia, that sometimes you go down there and if you put a little bit of fluid on it, it can slick the fault up and make it slip and cause an earthquake. So you can induce seismicity, but it's generally not large. I think the one in South Korea might have been about five magnitude, on a Richter scale earthquake. Yeah, but generally no. I mean, I don't think there's been, earthquakes in Iceland are generally related to more like the volcano, and it's on a big fault zone more so than the geothermal energy. It's producing, but it's something to keep in mind. And how that can be averted is they need to know where these old faults are, so they need to do better geologic kind of mapping of the area before they start pumping fluids down, so they know they're not pumping fluid right on an old fault. As has been shown, if you pump fluid on an old fault, you build up pressure on it, and you can cause it to slip again and cause an earthquake.
So just check where you are before you make the pump.
Exactly. Invest in seismic monitoring so you can see those old fault zones, before you start pumping.
Majorly increase the use of geothermal energy?
For sure. Like I'm for like any kind of energy that could get us away from using, oil and gas. Don't get me wrong, oil and gas has its pros and cons. It has its pros. It's good for getting groceries from point A to point B in semi trucks. We do need oil and gas, but it'd be great if we could limit, the energy we use in our homes. It'd be nice if we didn't have to use any oil and gas to heat our homes or keep the lights on, right? But currently 60% of the United States uses fossil fuels for electricity generation. It'd be nice if we could get away from that. Geothermal is one of the things we can use to start taking up a bigger slice of that pie, right? Just like solar, wind. The thing about geothermal is it's a good baseline energy, kind of like natural gas, where it can work both day and night. And throughout any season, the water comes up, the water goes down, water comes up, water goes down. Just like natural gas is always firing day, night. Thing about solar, you can't use at night. Thing about wind, you can only use generally in windy seasons. In the summer, the wind starts to die off.
Yeah.
And then the wind production goes down. Solar, obviously you can't generate solar electricity at night. Geothermal, you can produce it both day and night.
Yes.
So if we can start to invest more in it and use it more in our local communities, yes, it could definitely help limit our reliance on oil and gas electricity generation.
Be a realistic percentage of the population using geothermal energy by 2030?
I mean, it's really low right now. I think it's less than a percentage uses geothermal. It's just like I think the big plan is the geysers in California. It's called just the geysers, and that's a pretty good one to look at if you want to just study a basic geothermal system power plant. Now, as more people move out west, Arizona population is going up, Utah the population is going up, and I do think it could be roughly 5% by 2030 if the investment stays there and the motivation stays there to invest in geothermal. And that has to be driven because it's really fledgling. It's just a really new kind of energy source in terms of municipal power. That if it stays there, it could get up to 5%.
That sounds great. That'd be awesome.
And a last question, is there anything more that you would like to share about geothermal energy?
Just keep researching it. Like I said, there's some interesting stuff going on. Good resources are the National Geothermal Data System. It's called NGDS. I helped put together some of it and upload a lot of data to it. And SMU is one of the funders of it, or one of the workers on it. The college I went to, USGS, helped fund it, and the American Association of Geothermal Energy and DOE also helped put some money behind it. So just that's a good data source. They do talk about some new systems that are coming online. Like I said, using old oil and gas wells to produce geothermal energy. That's a possibility, as those oil and gas wells dry up, we can start to use the same infrastructure they have set up to pump that fluid down there and bring it back up. Like in Pennsylvania, the Bakken Shell, if you might have heard of that. It's in the Appalachian region. So that could be a possibility.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Thank you.
No problem. I appreciate having a chance to talk to y'all too, and your interest in geothermal.
Yep.
All right, well, have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really hope that you are inspired and decide to become a steward of the environment.
Something I learned is that people can learn to harness and extract energy in a thoughtful way that does not harm our environment. What did you learn, and what will you learn in the future?